Hello and welcome. I'm Anna Christensen, and today I'm going to show you how to create this beautiful watercolor wreath for Christmas. The supplies you're going to need are watercolor paper. I'm using 140-pound weight watercolor paper today that I have formed into a 5 by 5 inch greeting card. I also have a scrap piece of watercolor paper, a round watercolor brush. This is a number 8, and an optional pen, number 8 micron in my case, an old toothbrush for spattering, an optional step, a paper towel, and some water, of course. And the paints that we're going to use today are 5 colors. I have Payne's Gray, Permanent Carmine, Windsor Green, Permanent Sap Green, and Burnt Umber. Finally, to help us in our creation of our wreath today, I'm going to be using a cup with a diameter of about 3 inches across the rim. So once you have everything assembled, you're ready to start. Let's begin with our wreath base. To create the wreath base, I'm going to use the cup that I mentioned before, and I'm going to paint it with burnt umber. So I need to moisten up my burnt umber, which is dry right now. I'm going to dip my paintbrush in the water, bring the water to the paint, and stroke the paint gently until I have a nice pigmented puddle of paint next to it. Once I have that prepared, I'm ready to use it to paint the rim of my cup. Just placing some paint all along the rim, and then I'm going to use it as a sort of a stamp in the center of my paper. And I'm going to do that a total of 3 times, offsetting each of those circles a little bit, and that will create the base for my wreath shape. So on the end, I'll have a total of 3 circles, and there's the base of my wreath. I'm going to set that aside for now to dry, and then we'll work on practicing the components of our wreath. The leaves and the berries, is what I mean by the components. First, we're going to practice the eucalyptus leaves, and then we'll do what I'll call the leafy stems, then pine boughs, and finally berries. So let's start with the eucalyptus leaves. For this, you're going to need the scrap piece of paper. Let's mix our paint. Eucalyptus leaves, for the purpose of this painting, we're going to do a nice gray-green and use a lot of water in the paint to make it very faint and light, because these leaves we want to be in the background. I'm going to bring some water to moisten up my Windsor Green, and I'm going to be careful not to put too much pigment in there. And then I'm going to come and touch a little bit of that onto the Payne's Gray. And you can see right here, this is the color that I want. And I'm going to bring just a little bit more of that Windsor Green over. And a little bit more Payne's Gray, maybe even more water. So I have a really pale gray-green. And to test it, to see if I like the color, I will go ahead and tap it on my paper towel. And I'm happy with that, so I'm going to start practicing. Again, I want to make sure to tap out some of that excess water and paint on my brush before I start putting on the paper. To create the leaf shape for the eucalyptus, I'm going to take the tip of my brush and press gently in a curve to the left, lift up my brush, place it back on the tip, curve to the right, and meet at the bottom. And then I'm going to fill in that little oval that I just created with my paintbrush. All right, I'm going to do that again a total of 3 times to make 3 nice round leaves in a group of 3 formation, like a leaf stem. So place the tip of the brush on the paper, curve to the left and lift, tip, curve to the right, and meet at the back of the leaf, filling in the gaps as you wish. Now, it's okay to leave a little bit of white in the middle of these leaves if you want to. It makes it look nice too. I'm going to connect these 3 leaves together in a stem. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just bring down a little bit of this stem shape and connect them. And there you are. There you are. We've practiced our first component, which is our beautiful eucalyptus leaves. Let's move on to the leafy stem, is what I'm calling those. So we need to mix up some more of some vibrant green using the warmer color of green that we have, permanent sap green. So I'll bring some water over to that paint and just carefully stroke some of the paint into my water. And I want more pigment in this one than I used for my eucalyptus leaves. I might bring a little bit more water. Although I think I want to maybe dull this color down just a little bit to be a little bit more in keeping of what I have in mind for this, this painting. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and I'm going to go and moisten, mine's already wet, but if yours is dry, moisten your permanent carmine and bring just a little bit of it on your brush and stir it into that permanent sap green. Excuse me. And then test that to see if you like the color of it on your paper towel. I think that's about right. So I'm going to use that. So again, tapping the excess off. For our leafy stem, we're going to start with the stem this time. So I'm going to paint a line in place that I will attach all of my leaves to. I'm going to do these in groups of 5 leaves. So I'll go to the tip and curve to the left and lift, curve to the right and lift, and then fill in the center or most of the center. Now I'm going to do 2 leaves to the left of the stem and connecting them to the stem like this. And then I'll turn my paper a little bit so that I can comfortably reach the other side and do 2 more. You can see that I'm leaving a little bit of space in the middle of these because I like the way that looks, but you can fill them all the way in if you'd like. And there you have our leafy stem. And we're ready to move on to practicing our third component, which is our pine boughs. So rinse your brush. The pine bough has a brown center, so we're going to be using our burnt umber, which I've already moistened because of my wreath for our use in the wreath base. I'll get a little bit of that on my brush and then we'll come and just tap out a stem. Tapping off some excess on my paper towel so I'm ready to go. Use the tip of your brush and do a light line for the center of our pine bough. Rinse your brush and then let's get our evergreen color ready. For my evergreen color, I'm going to mix that right next to the Windsor green. So I'm going to be adding a lot more pigment into this area. So I'm brushing the brush across the paint and adding it to the water. If you can see how much that's darkened from that, that's what we're going for. However, I want my evergreen color to be quite a bit darker than that, more rich. So I'm going to tap off my excess and come and grab some of my permanent carmine and stir that into my Windsor green. Can you see how that just really darkened that color up? Now tap it on your, tap that right onto your paper towel to see if that's the right color. I'm going to add a little bit more of the Windsor green to it because I got a little bit black. Although it's close, I do want it to be rich and dark. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I'm ready to start my evergreen needles. A little trick for getting the tip back of on your paintbrush. Roll the paintbrush gently on the palette so that it reforms that sharp tip so that you can use it to make fine, thin needles. Topping off the excess of our paint, I'm going to go in, starting at the center of the stem with a vertical hold so I have a lot of control over where I'm stroking these lines. And I'm going to go outward and up in a sweeping motion from the center of the stem. And you can see my lines are going to kind of curve a little bit toward the middle as I go up the stem, creating those really fine pine needles. All right, that is our pine bough component. And now we are on to the fourth and final component practice, our berries. So rinse your brush. And for this one, we just need our permanent carmine. So we just need to wet our permanent carmine and load it up on the brush, making sure to do a nice tip here. So I'm rolling the brush to get that tip really nice and pointy. And you can see I'm also leaving excess paint on the palette. Tapping the excess off on my paper towel so I don't have too much water glopping onto the paper here. A vertical hold so I have a lot of control, and I'm doing little circles. And it's okay to leave the centers of these circles white if you want to leave some of them white, because that helps our brains think of as if it were shining in the light. Like these are beautiful shiny berries. You can either go in a circle shape like you're writing the letter O, or you can also do the same sort of motion we did with the leaves where you go curve to the left, curve to the right, and meet in the middle. I'm going to be doing groups of about 3 to 5 berries here, but it's not a rule. You can do however many you want. All right, once our berries are complete, I'm going to tap off most of my paint, and then I'm going to moisten it a little bit, and then come and get a little bit of burnt umber. And that's for our stem for our berries. It's okay if there's a little bit of red in it still, because our stem for these might have a little bit of redness to them. Tap off the excess on your paper towel using a nice light touch, because we want these to be thin lines. We will connect our berries together using a stem. And we're done with our practice for our components for our wreath. We're now ready to put them all together and create something beautiful. So let's bring back our wreath base that we created earlier. It should be all dry by now, and we're ready to plug in all of our leaves. So I'm rinsing my brush, and I'm going to go back and find that puddle that I made for the eucalyptus leaves. And I'm going to get a little bit of that and just start adding eucalyptus. Now remember, when I paint my leaves in on my wreath, I want all of them to be flowing in the same direction. So I'm going to put my stems in as if they were all going counterclockwise, because that feels comfortable for me. Tapping off excess paint on my paintbrush, or on my paper towel, I'm going to put my tip down, swerve to the left, lift, curve to the right, making a nice round leaf for my eucalyptus. And I'm going to do groups of 3 leaves like we did in the practice, with a stem joining them together. A word of caution when you are glazing a color on top of another one, like we are in this case. I'm going to try not to fuss too much with these leaves so I don't bring up the burnt umber into my eucalyptus paint. I want it to lay over top of it and not stir up together. Oh, okay. And so I forgot my stem, but I'm going to add that in now. I'm going to do about 5 or 6 of these eucalyptus stems going around my wreath base. So I'm going to quit talking so much, and I'm going to let you paint yours in too. Making my leaves nice and round to get that beautiful eucalyptus look. And sometimes leaving a little bit of white just for preference. Right. All right. I think I'll add one more leaf. So maybe this stem has 4 leaves on it, just to fill in the gaps there a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry. So I'm going to pause the video while that dries, and then we'll move on to our leafy stems. All right, that's pretty much dry, so I'm ready to come in with my leafy stems. So I'm getting some of that permanent sap green mixture that we created earlier for our practice, and I'll tap off the excess on my paper towel. And then remember, for these leafy stems, we start with the stem. So I'm going to draw in a curved line here, and then go to the tip of that, and then curve to the left, curve to the right, and fill it in. I'm making a group of 5 leaves, remember, so on either side of the stem. I'll be working on curving left and right. I do like to leave a little white, but do it however you like. And again, I'm going to just fill these in around the edge. I usually plan to use about 5 or 6 stems. And again, they're all tending toward the counterclockwise direction. And I'm alternating the direction that I place them in. They're not always left then right, then left then right. I just sort of go with how I feel, but just so that they're not all the same exact way, because we would have variation in a real wreath. And that's what we want for our painting as well. Curve to the left, curve to the right. All right. I hope you're enjoying this so far. I find it to be very relaxing and a fun activity to do, and it's fun to think of you all painting along with me. I think one more of those stems will be just about right. Okay. I think that's all I need for leafy stems, so I'm going to move on to our next component. It's time to paint in some pine boughs. So I'm rinsing my brush, and remember, the pine boughs start with some burnt umber for the stem part before we go back in and add the needles. So I'll go around and kind of plant in my stems for the pine boughs like this. So I know where I'm going with them. And then I'll be ready to come back in and do all of that wonderful evergreen color at the same time. So I have a puddle of deep evergreen that I mixed that's been sitting for a bit. So I'm going to test it, make sure it's still not too much water has evaporated and it's still the color I want. It looks great, so I'm ready to continue. And remember, I want a nice sharp point, so I'm coming back to my palette and rolling my tip, rolling the tip of my brush so that I get that really nice tip, and I'm ready to paint fine pine needles. So the way I do this is I go from the center of the pine stem and I do sweeping motions that curve up and in, and I'm trying to use just the tip of my brush because I like those fine lines. And I just love these pine boughs in this wreath. I think it gives it wonderful different textures in here. Makes it look vibrant and very wintry, which is perfect for our Christmas wreath. All of my pine needles are sort of curving toward the center and upward. And you can also, if you want to, think about making the ones toward the bottom a little bit longer than the needles toward the top of your stem, but don't worry too much about it. Oh, and that one I got really quite thick. I'm going to try to take a little of that pigment off with my paper towel, but I'm not going to stress about it. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect, and little inconsistencies actually make it interesting. So don't worry if you make a mistake. All right, I'm taking a look and seeing where I might want to add any more. I think I'm happy with that, except for maybe a little bit more bushiness in this one. And now we're ready to add our final component for the wreath, which is our berries. So rinse your brush, excuse me, and come back with your permanent carmine. Mine still is wet, but if yours needs to be re-moistened, do that now. And I'm going to add that we need a pointy tip again, so let's roll the tip of our brush on our palette so we have it nice and pointy. We don't want any excess or too much excess water or paint on the brush, so we can have fine control over our berry making. I'm just gonna find a place where I think it could use berries and add these little circles like we practiced earlier. Little groups of shiny berries. Oh, and already on this one I'm doing 6, where I thought I would do groups of 3 to 5. So rules are made to be broken. Again, it wasn't really a rule. And again, to make it feel harmonious, I'm going to do groups of maybe 5. I mean, I'm going to do about 5 or 6 bunches of berries. All right, and I think I need one more bunch here. Remember, you can use a circle movement, your brush, or you can do the left and then right movement like we've done with the leaf making. Whatever works for you. All right, and when you're finished with your berries, we need to make stems for them. So get rid of most of your paint, and if you have a little bit of carmine left over, that's fine, because again, a little bit of reddish in the brown stem won't hurt it. It will look natural. So I have my burnt umber on my brush, tapping off the excess. And again, I'm making sure that all my stems, I'm making them go counterclockwise. And maybe I'll start with the ones that are more dry. Being careful not to put my hand on any damp berries and smear the whole painting, because that would be tragic at this point. So let's just add stems here. Just so they feel grounded, or so the berries aren't floating in space. Yeah, watching my hand so I don't mess up anything. All right. Now the wreath is complete. If you would like to stop here and you feel like this is perfect for how you want to end, it's beautiful. You could end right here. An optional step that I did in the example was some spattering with the same paint colors that we used to paint with. And so if you'd like to do that, now's the time to pull out an old toothbrush. If you don't have one, you can use your paintbrush and just tap it like this on here. In fact, I can show you with our first color, how we do that. I'm going to cover the back side of my card because I don't necessarily want this spatter there, but you could spatter the whole card front and back, and that would look nice also. Also, a word of caution here. Don't wear anything beautiful or fancy or precious to you. This might get messy. If you are wearing something precious, please cover up with a smock or an apron or something like that. So I'm going to show you with the paintbrush first. I've gotten a little bit of the permanent carmine watered down a little bit on my brush, tapping off a little bit of the excess, and then I'm going to tap, tap, tap like this along my painting to get some lovely spattering. And I don't want to go overboard with this. It's so easy to do, and I've done it so often. I think that's enough. And then even if you feel like it's too vibrant, if you don't like it to be quite so vibrant as the foreground colors, you could go back with a paper towel and pick up, while it's wet, and pick up some of the pigment off of there, like that. All right, now I think we'll do green, and maybe I'll show you this time with the toothbrush. So I'm rinsing that out, making sure I don't have any old paint on there. And maybe I'll get some of our sap green the mixture we used, watered down a little bit. And again, I'm going to tap off the excess on my paper towel and just sort of use my finger to help spatter the paint. And then maybe finally a little bit of the evergreen color to finish it off. If you want to, you can add brown, but I feel like this feels like enough to me. And so I'm going to say that we're done. So let's let that dry, and then we'll come back with our final optional step, and that is adding an inspirational message in the middle. Okay, the spattering has dried, everything is dry, and it's looking beautiful. If you would like to add greeting here or an inspirational message, that's the final step. In the example, I put joy, which I really like, and it's pretty easy to fit in without too much overthinking on my part. So, but whatever message you'd like to add, you can do so now. You can use what I'm using you can use a pen like I'm using, or if you would rather, you can just use some paint that we used, one of the paint colors that we used in our painting, and the tip of your brush and make a message that way. I'm going to go ahead and use my pen now and write a message in. Feel free to use a pencil if you need to block it in first. I'm just going for it. And that's it. Before we can call ourselves completely done, we need to sign our work. So I'm going to ask you to pick up your brush one more time, choose a color that we used for our painting, and we're going to sign our work. I like to sign in the bottom right-hand corner, but wherever you'd like is fine. I'm going to put my initials here. And I am finished. I hope you're happy with your work. It looks beautiful. Someone who receives this is going to be so impressed and happy, and they'll know that it came from your heart because you created it with your own two hands. Thank you for joining me today, and I want to wish you a Merry Christmas.